Hello, everyone. We're happy that you were able to join us today to this webinar. In today's webinar, we'll be covering the main features and options that were included in the RapidAuthor 10 version of the product. There will be two presenters, myself, my name is Pavel Yesenkov, and also Sergey Bedorov, who will be covering the data import block of this webinar. So to get started, we'll have 4 blocks that will have our main attention. The first one will be the authoring process. The second block would be divided to Cortona3D Editor Pro Tool. Third block would be all about data import and data transition. And the last block would be for the Team-centered Service Planner application. Okay, so to get started, the authoring process and what was improved and enhanced in the new version of the RapidAuthor project. So at start, we have the first option, so the ability of the spell checker directly from the document editor. So this feature will allow your authors to check and correct the typing of the document, which will increase the quality of your document and will correct all of the mistakes that are not wanted in the documentation that you're creating. Okay? A very useful option that could dramatically increase the value of your content creation. The second option is the filtering in the database documents and also in HTML publications. So what this is a new option that was added, and it allows you to make filters in your documents. How this works, you basically can, using the data standard documentation, you can assign to a particular step an identifier, so-called product. So here we see that at the step 2, we're assigning a product, and the step 3 will type in a different product. And afterwards, using those 2 products, you can basically filter and either include or exclude blocks of information from your documentation. And applying the filter, the output of the document editor will change, including or excluding only the filters that you have applied. Same thing goes to the HTML publish. So here we have a similar option. We have a filter in which we also can include or exclude several types of information based on the product definitions that we've set previously in the document editor. Okay. A similar feature, but the filtering will be based on S1000D specification standard. So it kinds of the functionality is similar, but the approach is different. So in S1000D, you have a so-called applicability setting. Here we have 2, the APMK1 and APMK9. So governing those 2 types and applying the filters, you also can either include or exclude a step from the documentation. Same as previous, the filter applies also to the HTML. When you'll be showing the product to the end user, you'll also be able to filter and include or exclude the part of the documentation that's wanted or not. Okay. This also brings the level of the formality in the document and level of quality for your documentations. Okay. The next feature would be, this is more of a ability to customize documents. So this would be a separate documentation, which will be provided with the package. It will allow you to use the contents of the PDF, so you can control the appearance of your output, of your PDF output, if you're working with data documentation, right? The next one is ability to create links between parts and your documentation. For those of you who have used the rapid work instruction, this would be a known so-called addition. But now also in the data standard documentation, you can now link parts or assemblies directly to your document. So here we would like to link, for example, the rotor's assembly to a specific sentence in the document. So for this, we just have to drag and drop our assembly into the document editor, which will create an XREF item, which will be for the end user as a linkage in the documentation. So we're going to that step. And if we will click on that rotor word, it will zoom into the part or assembly and will highlight the assembly that has been linked to the 3D. This allows the user a much more intelligent interface, so he would understand what parts or assemblies were raised attention to him. The next addition was the alignment comments for the timeline. This is more of a user interface upgrade. So these comments were already present in the previous versions of the software, but now they're highlighted to the procedure editor toolbar. So if we'll see, we have now 6 or 7, 8 options that we can use. So you can now more easily and more quicker access those timeline alignments. So there are a couple of options. So they could, the animation could be shown after the end of the previous one. You can also break that alignment. You can also, after breakage, start and move your timeline steps as you want manually. And also you can use one of the alignments that are available from the buttons above. This is more of a quality improvement, so the author can now more easily and fastly manipulate the timeline how he wants and when he wants. So here we will see the rest of the alignments. So the animations will start at one point for all of the steps. So a couple of clicks and you can manage your timeline more efficiently now. Yes. The next to the new toolbar button. So once again, this is also more of an interface upgrade. This option was already present in the previous version from the submenu. Now adding objects or parameters that have additional options, you now have a particular spread button at the top of the toolbar. So here we see the edit object parameters, which calls up the spring object parameters window in our case, which we can modify easily, quickly, and click OK. So once again, increases the efficiency and the time which is used for that addition. The next one would be that the rapid learning publications are now don't require the compatibility mode in the Internet Explorer 11. So you can use the raw Internet Explorer 11. And the last but not least, the added support of the 3D connection space mouses. Those mouses are usually used by the people who are deeply working with the 3D. So if you're not using that, it's okay, but for people who do use those are coming pretty handy. So we now support those as well. So this would be our first block, which we want to make a pause and get a short Q&A session in. So if you have any questions regarding the shown attributes, you can write it down into the Q&A section to the host. We'll give 2 minutes and start answering. Okay, so at any point, if you have the question, you can submit it to the Q&A, and we will answer them at the end. And for now, we'll go further to the second block, which is covering the Cortona3D Editor Pro functionality. The major improvement was the addition of the axonometric grids. So working with the Cortona3D Editor Pro, you will now have the ability to create your own grids based on the parameters that you will enter. So by clicking New and setting the axis for your new grid, you can create your grid and start working with image illustrations or object. Also, we'll show you how, by applying, for example, simple objects, you can create a fully isometric, let's say, object. So for this, we'll need to convert the image to the axonometric grid, and then you don't need to do anything, just start readily working with the objects. You have the full alignment, the centers, the dots, the points, everything works as the usual grid. This would be a major impact for illustrators who are working with the 2D images or creating objects in the 2D. They could now easily, dividing lesser time, create more content and modify it more efficiently with the use of the axonometric grids. So here, by dividing 1 or 2 minutes, you can actually create the full isometric model. Okay. The next addition was the ability to keep the parameters of the objects while scaling them. So what this does is you can now actually control if you want to keep or exclude the parameters from scaling. So here we'll have 2 objects with a hash. We'll duplicate the object so you can see the difference. The first object would be scaled without including the parameters of the hash. So the hash would have to remain the same after scaling. And with this object, we will adjust the shape properties, including hashes and lines. And as you can see, the hash has changed with the scale of the object. Okay. Next would be the 3 minor adjustments. We will show them in one short video clip. So the length and angles will be visible in the property inspector. So whenever you will be creating objects, drawing lines, you will now actually see how the length and the angles, for example, of a line. In the right button corner, you will be viewing that information for more accuracy. Okay. The second one is that after creating an object or a line, for example, you are now able to manipulate the length of the line, for example, and the angle of the line. So this allows you a more precise creation. So if you're using exact length and exact angles, you can now specify them in the property inspector. The third one would be the not a new option, but now the select all option includes the layers settings as well. So if you'll exclude a layer and select all, you'll be selecting every detail without that layer. If the layers are all green and you do the select all, you're selecting the whole CGM objects within your image. Okay. And last but not least, the addition of the additional CGM profiles. So working with the illustrations, you can now actually choose which would be the end CGM profile in the output of your work. For that, you just have to go to the property inspector and select the profile that you're gonna export and select the addition of that profile. This will allow you to distribute your images and projects into different profiles. So here we'll have another pause for the Q&A. If anybody has a question about the Cortona3D Editor Pro Grids or anything else, and if not, we will go further to the import data block. Okay, so once again, at any time, just put in the question in the Q&A and we will cover it at the end. So the third block would be the data import block. This block would be presented by Sergey Bedorov. We will now shift the presenter to him and he will continue.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sergey, and I will tell you about new additions in the import module and in rapid configuration, which is creating the import profiles for that module. So the first new feature is the automatic correction of flipped surfaces. So to show you what it means, let's create a new profile using the VRML template and load a sample file which presents the orientation defect. Here you see a part which has different surfaces oriented into different directions. Some surfaces are visible from the inside, some surfaces are visible from the outside, and it looks really strange. What we could do in the past was only, we can always change the surface orientation. For example, switch the primary and secondary orientation of surfaces. But in this case, it really doesn't help because in either case, some surfaces are visible from the wrong side. Previously, we could change the surface type and make the surface two-sided, like this. At first glance, it looks better, but in fact, there are still defective edges, which are now highlighted in red. These edges are causing some lighting artifacts in 3D, and also they are visible on 2D images, on the vector 2D images, and you have to delete them manually. In the new version, we have introduced a new algorithm which can automatically correct the flipped surfaces like this. So this is the shape corrected by the new algorithm. You can see that the surface is still one side, so it's visible only from the outside. But all incorrect surfaces were flipped, and now the surface is solid and doesn't have any defective edges. Yeah. Now the surface is solid and doesn't have any defective edges, which is also indicated at the bottom that all cracks were healed. So this algorithm can allow you to correct the surface defects. I can also demonstrate this on another sample file without corrections. It looks like this. So you see that half of the file is inside out, and with the new algorithm, it becomes correct, with the exception of some edges that are still highlighted in red. But overall, it's much better than it was initially. The second feature is support for logical conditions for metadata mapping rules. Let's create a new profile. For PLM XML data and load a sample PLM XML file. Which is the pump that you are already familiar with. In the metadata section, I will add another metadata, occurrence sequence number. You see that it's a number with values like this. Now I select a specification, for example, generic APC, and enable the TPL table creation. So let's select the usual rules. Product ID goes to part number. Description goes to description. Set the checkboxes, and you see a sample of the DPL table that will be created after import. The new feature is that now you can specify rules which make some metadata depend on other metadata. For example, a rule can work or not work depending on a different metadata or on a substring. For example, the parts in our source data have a sequence number metadata, which is 10 here. Here it's also 10, and here it is 20. And for example, I could require that the description in the DPL table should depend on this metadata. For example, it should be a constant string, for example, 10, like this. So let's write the string 10 to description and increase the priority of this rule. Now you see that all descriptions are containing the string 10. But actually, I want that this rule should work only if the sequence number equals to 10, like here. So now I will go to this rule and enable the new checkbox apply condition. And here I can specify this condition. The condition is comparing two values. It compares the metadata, for example, the sequence number, and a value that I defined here, for example, 10. And I require that this metadata should be equal to this string. Here on the left you can see a list of sample values, and you can readily check that in this case the condition is satisfied, and in this case it's not satisfied. And here it as well. Click OK. OK. And now you see that the string 10 appears only in some TPL rows, in those where the sequence number is equal to 10. Here and here. And here also. In this row, the sequence number is 20, therefore this rule doesn't work, and the next rule, this lower priority, is working and copying the description metadata. So now in our DPL table, the description metadata depends on two source metadata simultaneously, on the description and on the sequence number. It is also possible to create more complicated rules. For example, I can change the rule and specify that it will analyze not the sequence number, but the product ID. And I will require that the product ID, which is sometimes a number or contains a number, that it should be divisible by 10. Actually, it means that the last digit should be 0. Here, it's possible to specify a regular expression. And here I enter like this. A dot specifies one symbol, one character, and end of string. This regular expression selects the last symbol of the source value. You see that here it is 4, and here it is 0. And I will require that this value should be equal to 0. So now you can see that the condition is satisfied for this value and for this value, but it's not satisfied for this value, for example. Here it's also not satisfied, where the last digit is not 0. Okay. Now you see that the description contains the string 10 only for part numbers which are ending with a 0. And for other part numbers, it contains the source metadata description, which is copied by the next rule. So the logical conditions for metadata copy rules are quite a powerful feature which allows you to specify quite complicated processing. The next feature is that the default representation is changed to high in all standard import profiles. It means that when you create a new profile and select a template, the templates which are supplied together with RapidAuthor, they now contain in the representations section, the high quality representation is now selected as the default representation. So when you import the project, the high quality representation will be automatically selected for all parts. Also, if you start Rapid Generator and select a standard profile from this list, you will also get the high quality representation as the selected representation for all parts. You can later change the representation, but initially when the project is imported, the high quality will be selected. For all profiles that you already have, that you have created yourself, the representation settings will be kept as you have specified. So we only change the standard profiles and templates. The next feature is the new module RapidData Converter, which can import CAD data. Let me tell you in which cases it will actually work. If you start the Rapid Generator from the start menu, like this, so you start the Rapid Catalog or Rapid Generator, and you create a new profile. You select a source file from your computer. In this case, you now will be able to import CAD data in addition to XML data. Previously, if you install RapidAuthor Center and you start Rapid Data Import tool and select a profile, you see that many of the standard profiles have an exclamation mark, which tells you that the Rapid Data Converter or Rapid Data Converter is not installed. So initially, when you install RapidAuthor Center, you can only import GT data and XML. If you try to import, for example, CATIA data, let's try to do it. Create new project. And import CATIA data like this. You immediately get an error that RapidAuthor or Rapid Data Converter is not installed. But now there is a new product in the price book, which is called Rapid Data Converter, which you can purchase and install on top of the RapidAuthor Center installation. When install it and select the profiles, then you see that the question marks have disappeared. So you can import all these formats: CATIA, NX, ProEngineer, or Creo, SolidWorks, SolidEdge, and many other formats. And the Rapid Converter module is used. So let's try to do it now. Select the profile CATIA, OK, and import CATIA data. The project has been imported. And this is the geometry imported from native CATIA files. By the way, you can see that each shape has the high quality selected by default. This is because the high quality representation is now the default one. The low quality is also available, so you can change it if you need. But when the project is first opened, the high quality is the active representation. And the fifth feature is the ability to create import profiles for Teamcenter Service Plan. Oh, sorry. Let me tell something more about the previous feature. Many users of Teamcenter have CAD data inside Teamcenter. So it looks like this. You can have a Teamcenter item which has multiple data sets, the GT data set and a CAD data set, for example, CATIA, Unigraphics data or CATIA or anything else. And many customers want to import the CAD data from Teamcenter stored in this way. So currently, this is not possible using Cortona3D RapidAuthor. And even if you install Rapid Converter, it will not allow you to import CAD data from Team Center. CAD data can be imported currently only from files stored on your computer or on a network drive, for example. From Team Center, you can only import GT data, but actually it should be enough, because when you're integrating a CAD system with Team Center, all data is automatically converted to GT, and there should be no problem with that. So the fifth feature is the ability to create import profiles for Service Planner. Team Center Service Planner is a special module for Team Center, and my colleague Pavel will tell you about this in a few minutes. And if you want to integrate RapidAuthor with Team Center Service Planner, then it's now possible to create import profiles for this. For example, let's create a new profile for PLM XML data, of course, because it's Team Center. Select a specification. For Team Center Service Planner, we recommend you to use the job card, work instruction job card specification, and then enable the procedure import. And the new feature is this new checkbox, which enables the profile to import metadata from Team Center Service Planner. Currently, the algorithm is not customizable, and that also it's possible to enable Service Planner import, and it will work because it is already set up. So now you can enable this checkbox, save the profile, and use it in Team Center Service Planner, and it will import all data you need. So this is it. If you have any questions, please write them into the questions and answers section in your WebEx, and we'll wait a couple of minutes for your questions. Thank you.
So Service Planner is an application within the Team Center, and the Service Planner has objects called work cards, and they can be configured using the standard Team Center tools. They could inherit or place the information about how many people you need, which product you need to use, which actions engineers have to perform for the product. You can also assign occurrences types. You can also add activities, which will be basically describing what exactly engineers have to perform with the product, how many time it will take them to do a certain step. Maybe they will have to use tools. Maybe the work card should have notices also placed within the procedure. You can also insert warnings there. Here you see that each activity has the line of activity, also a more detailed description of what steps should be achieving. It also has the duration of the action in seconds, and the activity execution that says that the engineer has to perform an action, or he could, for example, at the end sign off a document to his superior. So the idea is to bring all of the configured work card information to the Cortona3D project, and then make a documentation of this activity. So after the standard Team Center setup and configuration is done, you launch the Cortona3D import option, which in our case will be using the import profile that Sergey has showed us. And what we'll be actually doing is we will be importing all of the activities, notices, warnings, actions, and any other information that is present in this work card, such as duration of the steps, the description of them, and actually creating and assigning animations to the occurrence types that are set within the work card. So the import was completed successfully. Now we're going to open the Cortona Rapid Manual project, which will have the geometry, the procedure structure, and the document that was generated from the information of the work card. So the geometry, which is used as our beloved pump, the document editor has inherited the information from the work card. The procedure editor has created animations that correspond to the occurrence types of the work card. And you can see that the structure of the procedure editor is the mirror of what you have in the activities. So each activity has items which will be used at this particular step. And within the Cortona3D Rapid Manual project, you have an action union which incorporates those parts into animation. So here we'll show you what animations were generated. So the first ones are basic flashes showing that the bolts are removed. You can see it from the first surfaces. So let's say that the whole procedure is correct. We don't have to change anything. We save it all back to the Team Center. And when you do this, a topic, a Cortona3D storage object is created, which stores the Cortona3D project and document. We'll now show you the end output, the HTML version of the published document. So at the right side, we have the 3D. At the left side, we have our document. Once again, simple procedures of removing the front bolts of the pump. Then the occurrence type, for example, for author animation is changed, and you see that the assembly of the product is being performed. Each step is followed up by maybe a set of warnings or cautions, depending on how the work card was created initially in Team Center. And at the end, you see that the pump is being assembled all over again. Okay, so this is the published output, the document that the end user will have. Now we'll take a closer look at it. We'll move it to a more appropriate position. We'll move the plan details, and we'll move the documents so we can fill the screen. So what we want to show here is how the document was generated at the import step. So at the top, we have the name, which came from naming of the work card. If you have required conditions, persons, this is all brought up from Team Center. So here we have an engineer. In our assembly procedure, we also have the total hours of the total amount of time that the engineer has to spend to perform this inspection instruction. We also have a couple of notices that say that the engineer requires to have gloves. He has to inspect the pump before beginning. And then you basically have the procedure of the pump, which was brought up from the activities. You have the naming of the activity based on how it's named in Team Center, and the description of the step is brought from the activity description. So at the import step, because of the import profile, the RapidAuthor knows which information should go from which directory in the Team Center, and it places it into according position within our generated document. At the end, you also have, at each end of the step, you have the perform action that indicates that the engineer has to do something. Sorry. And in the end, the perform will change to sign off, because at the end he will need to sign the complete work instruction. And also, at the bottom you see two references that could be also included into the document, which could be referenced to a different work card. So basically the idea is to create the whole work card within the Team Center, and then by applying a specific import profile to your work card, so you could gather all the information from the Team Center to your document and publishing it to, let's say, an end user or customer. Okay. So this would be a time for our last Q&A session. Okay, so we see a couple of questions about the import configuration. Oh, okay. We'll give an additional 2 minutes to recalculate and ask questions, and then we'll end the meeting on that note. Okay, I see the question from Jinju. So the features in respect to the any new features with respect to electronic work instructions that we should look for. In the upcoming release, the most useful feature for the work instruction was that the data standard now has the ability to link the geometry with the document. Besides that, no major improvements, no major steps in that direction. Okay, so as far as I can see, there are no more questions incoming. Thank you all for attending and joining for our webinar and finding the time. The report will be sent to all of the invited persons, and you can also follow up with this by a video. Once again, thank you all for attending, and we wish you a good night.